Hey everyone, welcome to Taqueando. I'm your host, Bill Esparza, and this week we are heading to one of my favorite places, Las Playas de Mazatlán, Sinaloa, to speak with New York Times bestseller, cookbook author of Mi Cocina and Salsa Daddy. Also, he's a food television personality. I'm speaking of course, Rick Martinez, who's also, by the way, bringing Sonora-style tacos to your doorstep and in a restaurant at 6 Bay Area locations through local kitchens, a fast casual collective. But first, at Taqueando, eating antojitos is a way of life, from the world's most celebrated dining rooms to the gritty stands and storied market stalls that preserve culture. Life is short, so we must eat well. And here are this week's Antojitos rundown. I had the pleasure of attending Carlos Eric Lopez's 5th annual Dia de los Muertos gala, and I was actually invited by the Panaderia Rosetta, Chef Elena Regadas' people reached out, and so I didn't even know about this event. Of course, I didn't know it was the 5th annual, but it was really amazing, and it was a little pop-up. It was Panaderia Don Julio with Pan de Muerto from Panaderia Rosetta by Chef Elena Regadas. So really amazing. So I went to this big party with Camila Cabello and all these other celebrities just to try pan dulce. How about that? That's how dedicated I am to the cuisine and the culture, my friends. But a nice party. I sipped lots of Don Julio and, of course, had this wonderful bread. And this pop-up is going to be showing up around the United States, I believe. So look for the Panaderia Don Julio pop-up with Panaderia Rosetta. Now, folks, this was I'm not going to go into it, but it was a difficult week for me. So I didn't get out a whole lot. I did go to this event. And a friend of mine from Mexico City was here for a baptismal of her niece. She had invited me a while back, so I decided to go. Actually, I had connected them with Carnitas El Momo to do the catering because they were looking for a carnitas vendor. And so I did go to that. I had some amazing carnitas from El Momo. And, every time I try El Momo, the carnitas are amazing. And I always kind of think a lot actually about that taco, about how I want to dress it. And a lot of times I've just been taking the pickled jalapenos and putting them on there, and that's it, except for hot sauce. So salsa roja. And I like it that way a lot. But this time I'm like, I don't know why I never saw the salsa verde before. I asked them like, hey, do you guys normally have salsa verde out? And they go, yeah, I guess I'm missing it all the time. But what I decided to do is I poured a lot of juice. Like I just put pickle juice on the carnitas, and then I put salsa verde on one and salsa roja on the other. And I really like the verde. And I don't normally put cilantro and onions on the tacos at Carnitas El Momo. I normally just do the salsa roja and the pickled jalapenos, but I did like it with the salsa verde and a little bit of onions, always perfecting this taqueando thing, So that's it for the eats. Now, I do want to do a shout out for a shout out. The Air Jordan podcast, a friend of the Taqueando podcast. I've been on Air Jordan a couple times, and one of them was a taco crawl, and they were talking about it. And, the guys are always supportive of me, and they enjoyed the educational portion of my taco crawl that did take them to many neighborhoods. And the guys did mention they kind of liked a shorter crawl in Boyle Heights where you can just kind of walk from stand to stand. Well, I have to say, one of my main goals when I do a taco crawl, I kind of want to take you out for a few hours. I want to have you, and I want to take you to different neighborhoods because many people do not experience, especially if you're not Mexican, if you live different parts, whatever part of town you live in, you're not getting into places like Caray, and you're not going to Bell Gardens, and you're not going to Boyle Heights. You might go because that's one of the places people know, but you're not going to go to Arleta. You're not going to Huntington Park, Arlington Heights. You're not going to these neighborhoods. And I really love that part. So guys, that's what I wanted to show you besides food, is a little bit of life in the different Mexican and indigenous communities of Los Angeles. So I do agree it was a lot of driving, but worth it, I think. And if I had you again, I'd do it all over, even even if it killed you. And then, Jordan, you didn't follow my rules, buddy. 20, 20, 40. And so you ended up upchucking a shrimp. Well, you got to follow the rules, 20, 20, 40 for a big taco crawl. That's 20 bites in the morning, 20 bites in the afternoon. You guys have heard about the bite method from me, maybe. If not, that's what it is. Or on a taco crawl, 40 bites total. So you really got to count, and you got to make sure you don't go over, especially if you're going to a lot of spots, especially if you know how many stops you're going to make. If I say we're doing 7 stops, you got to think about that and think about how much you're going to have at each place. You're not going to be able to eat all the tacos on a crawl like that. But the main thing is to obviously not get, not overeat, but to see the neighborhoods, guys. That's what I wanted for you to experience. Probably neighborhoods you might, who knows, you might not ever make it back to some of these places. But if we go on a taco crawl, my friends, I'm showing you neighborhoods, and I love introducing you to people and the people that live in these various neighborhoods. So, Air Jordan, thanks for the shout out. A reminder that Taqueando is part of the Acquired Taste Media family. Be sure to tune into our sister podcast, the LA Food Podcast. This week, Luca is speaking with Ludo Lefebvre. You're not going to want to miss it. That drops on Friday. And now, vamos a taquear. Hello, Rick. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Wonderful. So we were, I think I expressed to you my love for Mazatlán. We both share that.
Yes, it's an amazing place. I mean, I came here during the pandemic and then just never left.
Yes, and you did it right. You didn't go to Mexico City and, join. You didn't join up with those digital nomads in Mexico City. You went to Mazatlán, which is the better choice.
Yes, I'm so thankful for that now.
Where's your family from?
So most of my family were born in Austin, Texas. My grandparents are from Torreón and Monterrey. So northern Mexicans.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So you're a Mexican American from Texas that actually knows his roots.
Yes.
You know what I'm talking about, right?
Believe it or not, yes. One of the only ones.
Right, exactly. Because the Tejanos, they're like, where's your great grandfather, Texas? He's from Texas. Like, they don't really have that connection, but that's wonderful. Torreón is a wonderful place. I've been there also. So today, Rick, I know, obviously you've been talking about salsa a lot, but I really want to do a deep dive into the molcajete and really grind this out here. Some of the thoughts that, I guess questions I have and things that I've been exploring for myself is I think your book really appreciates salsa in a way that we haven't seen. I mean, there's so many salsa books, you've seen a million of them, and you had to have some kind of confidence in doing and bringing this book to the public after seeing that, do we really need another salsa book? But obviously we did. Tomatoes and chiles are present and explored extensively in your cookbook, Salsa Daddy. And I love the way you broke them down into categories like salsa martejada and different types of techniques. So can you tell us the many styles of salsas found in your book?
I wanted to basically broaden people's perspective of salsa. I think everybody in the US and probably in a lot of Mexicans believe that, it's a salsa de mesa, right?
Yeah.
It's what you put on your taco. It's what's on the table for every meal. But salsa in the broadest definition is just sauce, right? And so that could mean salsas for desserts, salsas that have been preserved, salsas that have been cooked. I wanted to explore that idea as well, because I think, for me, one of my great loves in this country is the moles, the guisos, the pipianes. So many of the cooked salsas are incredible, and there's so many different regional variations of it as well. Like I studied French cuisine, like when I became a food professional.
Yeah.
And I love French cooking, and I love how documented it is, especially with the mother sauces. And to me, there are mother sauces here as well, like the moles and the pipianes. That was another sort of, little aim that I had with this book, is to broaden the horizon for what a salsa is, but also to suggest that, these, there are very specific fundamental sauces in Mexican cuisine that really define the cuisine, I think. And also they all add so much flavor.
Yeah, I mean, I think that again, people don't appreciate. They love salsas. They love the flavor. It's spicy and it's fresh and it brings flavor. But we miss out on the real significance. There are 32 completely different salsa regions, and I know you've delved into that. And the mother sauces, the French mother sauces, there are 5, and we're going to talk about one in particular today. But when I think about, people revere these sauces and all the variations you can do, from the velouté, bechamel, hollandaise, tomate, and española. And the tomato one, that's a very curious one for me, and we're gonna talk about that a little later. But we have so many salsas, and people don't appreciate these salsas on the same level and how they're used. And like, I know you spent a lot of time in Sonora, especially recently with the development of your restaurant project. But what I really loved about Sonora is that everybody has this salsa de chile colorado, that they use as a base, and that becomes the red salsa for enchiladas, for carne con chile, for chilaquiles, anything that has a red salsa. That one sauce sort of becomes the base, and then it gets changed and adapted to the dish. It gets thickened and thinned. It becomes part of so many things. I love that because Sonora doesn't have a lot of salsas that are in everyday use like that. But obviously there's places like Oaxaca where they have a lot more. But can you talk about, for the listeners, the different ways that base sauce, these mother sauces, how they translate into different types of Mexican dishes?
Sure. Dried chiles, and also fresh. But I think for, the type of the red salsa that you're talking about, fundamentally, it's generally guajillo and ancho or mulatto. And depending on where you are, it could also be a little bit of pasilla. I've also had some versions, I think more in like outside of the cities, in the ranchos, where they're growing Anaheims, and they have both fresh and dried, and so they'll throw a little bit of green chile in there as well, or they'll throw in a ripened fresh chile, which is red, for a little bit more sweetness and just to kind of change it up a little bit. But I think fundamentally, the three sort of most common dried chile bases for that kind of adobo or salsa would be ancho, pasilla, and guajillo. And then it just sort of flexes depending on where you are in the country.
Right.
And then, you get into herbs and spices, epazote, hoja santa, oregano, sometimes tomillo, canela, clavo, pimienta gorda, allspice, and star anise at times, or the seeds, sometimes cardamom. These are all, the amazing thing to me is like all of these herbs and spices grow in Mexico.
Right.
One of my favorite places is along the Gulf Coast in Veracruz and Tabasco. And I had no idea at the time. Like, I was touring a coffee farm, and I was staying in this little kind of hotel, and it was at the base of a mountain, and they were harvesting allspice. And I had always thought at that point, this is like maybe 6 years ago, I never really used allspice because in the US, I felt like it never had any flavor.
Right.
It was just sort of like that weird dusty thing that is in your mom's cabinet. I had the windows open in my hotel, and I'm sleeping, and I woke up, and I swear it smelled like someone was smoking a clove cigarette in my face. And I woke up and I was like, what is going on? And they were harvesting the allspice berries. They were shaking the trees, and then the berries would fall. And the wind was taking it off the top of the mountain and then blowing it down into the valley, and it was coming into my window. And it was so fragrant, and it was overpowering. And that was the point when I was like, okay, I'm going to start using allspice. This is incredible. And now, of course, I obviously only use Mexican allspice because it has flavor.
Yeah.
But it's amazing. I love using allspice in, a lot of different savory and obviously sweet applications as well. But, that red guiso or salsa exists all over the country. And then, it can be the base for adobos. It can be the base for moles. It can be the base for pipianes. And everybody just sort of adds their own sazon to it. And then, again, it can go into tamales or, whatever, whenever you need a red sauce, that's how you start it.
Right. And the key is, what you're saying too, is how people change it and adapt it for the dish, which something that doesn't happen as much in the United States. In the, crossing the border, we lost a lot of those traditions where you take a salsa and of course it's economics too. So restaurants couldn't afford to make all these salsas, and they're making one red salsa that they're using on tacos. Mm-hmm. And that's the same one they're using on enchiladas and chilaquiles. And that's why we're always saying, why are the chilaquiles not as good in the United States as they are in Mexico? Well, they didn't make the salsa. And it's really important that, these salsas are adapted to the dish. And it's endless. It's soups, as you said, it's in moles, it's in, guisados. And I want to say, when I look at the chiles in the world, I think we're the only culture that eats dried and fresh chiles in the various forms that we do, where other cultures, they just throw it in as heat or they use it as a salsa, a condiment. But it's like this all encompassing use of layers of chiles, that obviously you explore in the book.
And they have such amazing flavor, and that's...
Yeah.
It's another unfortunate thing about the quality, although it is getting better, but the quality of dried chiles in the US, oftentimes they can be really stale, very old, brittle, not have a lot of flavor. And, and I tell people when you're shopping, any dried chile should be almost like a dried fruit, right?
Yeah.
So if you imagine, they're dried, but they're not dehydrated. So they're not taken to the point where they're brittle. They're usually dried in the open air, which has humidity. And so, you remove most of the moisture. But what is left, because these are chiles that are allowed to ripen on the plant, they develop more flavor, they develop more of the sugars. And so they might be spicy, but they're also partly sweet. And so that inside of a really good chile ancho or mulato or morrita still has kind of like a sticky quality on the inside of it,
right,
like it's an apricot or a prune. And, and I think that's, when you have that kind of quality, well, it's not like chili powder, right? It's not like you're throwing a tablespoon in a dish just as a back note. It's like, right, no, we're actually going to stuff the chile ancho, and it's going to be a chile relleno, but using an ancho because we love that flavor.
Oh, it's a wonderful flavor, right?
Yeah, and
the fruitiness of it.
It's so good.
Yeah, and it makes such a big difference. I mean, I know you've gone through this experience where you're literally battling with your chiles, and you're like, why can't I get that flavor? And you just realize your chiles are dead. They've got nothing left, And but this is kind of, I mean, I think when you talk about like the Middle Ages, when what we call Mexico, the indigenous people have been using these things for thousands of years, and they all kind of arrive at the same time. The cultivation of tomatoes and tomatillos, the invention of the molcajete, the oldest molcajete that we have is around that time. Cultivation of chiles is starting to proliferate. And so these techniques are thousands of years old. Can you tell us a little bit about this history?
Yeah, I mean, I think that probably one of the most amazing things to me is that, what we were blessed with in this country, and everything that was grown together just complemented each other in the flavor. So, the beans, the calabaza, the chiles, the corn, all of these things. And, and I've read up on this idea of domestication because I think oftentimes we think, well, how did they know? How were they genetically modifying these things thousands of years ago? And
right.
And it was more about, identifying, okay, this particular plant, right, yields a larger ear of corn or has a particular type of chile. So we're going to save these seeds, and then we're going to grow those, but not this other one that had, like a smaller ear of corn or was prone to pests.
Right.
And I think also that's when this idea of like the relationship between the people and the crops came about, right? So there's this idea that if we take care of the crops and the plants, they will take care of us and nourish us and feed us. And so there's a strong connection, I think, in Mexico in farming and in agriculture that starts, back then with the indigenous people.
Yes.
And then you have, like innovations like the chinampas, in Mexico City. Well, obviously not Mexico City then, but in Tenochtitlan, and and this to me still kind of blows my mind that these ancient people, were providing for a city of over 100,000 by creating mats of palm, and then taking up sediment and soil from the bottom of the lake, and then just layering it. And so you have like basically this floating farmland that was rich in nutrients. Obviously, because it was on a lake, it had, a plentiful supply of water. And, and that they were able to grow so many different types of crops. And there was a very strong understanding of, horticulture and agriculture and seed preservation and nutrients. And when you think about, like, we're talking 6,000 years ago, and these people were farming, and also that these crops provided them the nutrients and the energy, especially after the discovery of nixtamalization. Before that, corn was pretty much inedible and had no available nutrients for human digestion. After nixtamalization, you obviously not only got tortillas and masa, but you also had the energy from the corn that allowed the building of the pyramids and the civilizations. And that to me is really, really incredibly amazing as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing that also that even poor people would have had access to high nutrition at that time, where in Europe, poor people were not accessing nutritional foods, and that were also flavorful, and you think about how much do bell peppers, which are also part of this story, and all the tomatoes and all the chiles, how they're used around the world as a flavor base, right?
No, it's so funny because like so many of the things like chocolate and tomatoes and chiles that spread across the world, there is a certain amount of pride that exists in this country because of the knowledge that these things that were, that either began here or grew here originally before the Europeans came, now, are prime ingredients in pizza and Italian food and whatever. But they like, it's interesting that you were talking about like the poor people had access to this, and also like just the flavor, and again, there are not necessarily written recipes, but at least descriptions of tacos and salsas with the certain ingredients that sound actually pretty flavorful and actually not very different than what we do today.
Yeah.
And that to me is another reason why I really love living here, because when I use my molcajete, I do feel that connection. Not only, before it was a connection to my mom and my grandmother, but knowing that there are people thousands and thousands of years ago that were grinding up the same chiles and tomatoes and tomatillos in a molcajete, just like I am now. It's really powerful, and it gives you a sense of history that I don't think I necessarily had or understood when I lived in the U.S.
Yeah, no, it's definitely, you're more connected with all of it. The audience matters so much. The audience that's there that sort of demands these things, and this flavorful food. Indigenous people created a nutritious, highly flavorful, diverse way of eating because you could make all these different salsas, all these different chiles, different types of tomatoes. And this is way before they were available in Europe or Asia. There were no chiles, there were no tomatoes in Europe. There were, none of this in Africa. This happens, in the 1700s. It starts to be used. And so, I was doing a little homework on this, and Carême did not include tomato sauce in his 4 base sauces, but Escoffier did include sauce tomate in his 1903 Le Guide Culinaire, where the names of the 5 mother sauces were listed. And of course, from there, so many derivatives. But what's crazy to me and just bonkers is that when we talk about the Columbian exchange, we just see a tomato going across the map. But the indigenous people showed the world how to cook these things, how to use them, all the culinary uses for all the sweet peppers, all the different types of tomatoes, and all the chiles. And that knowledge went to Europe and Africa and Asia. Why do you think this is left out of that story? When we, why did not Escoffier say, "Oh, and this sauce comes from Mexico and it was created by indigenous people"?
Well, I mean, actually, he was focused on French cuisine, and to be honest, like the actual his sauce tomate, I'm not a huge fan because it has flour in it. It has like wheat flour, and I don't particularly like that combination of tomato and flour. I don't think it was like a miscite or an oversight. I think he was focused on French cuisine in the same way that for example, Ricardo Munoz Zurita, who I think is probably on the same kind of level as Escoffier. Yeah. He's studied sure. Mexican cuisine for decades. He has written several books, doesn't reference other countries. It's just a study of Mexican gastronomy. I think we do so many better things, I love Mauricio.
I agree. So I'm more talking about the technique. I agree it's better. But like, for instance, in Mexican cuisine, if we use a bechamel, the people will say, "Oh, that's a French sauce." And if they're using a sauce tomate in France, they're not saying, "Oh, that's a Mexican sauce." I mean, it's one of those things that's, I think we don't think about a lot. I think about it a little bit, but no, I see your perspective. You're right. We do make better sauces than the sauce tomate.
I do think, though, that, like in the last 20 years, one of the things that's kind of blown my mind. So the first time I went to Mexico City was in 2003. And I remember fine dining was not Mexican. Like, you could not find Mexican food in anything that, had a high price point. And it was all European, mainly French. And most of the cooks that I talked to at that time would tell me, you can't sell grandmother food for that kind of a price point. 20 years later, Mexico has been recognized, by Michelin, by, the world in terms of, the UNESCO and having such an amazing and diverse and flavorful cuisine. And now young kids, I say kids, like teens and 20s and young 30s, that are cooking, that are chefs, that have studied all over the world, that are Mexican, that are now back in Mexico cooking. They are, completely revolutionizing the cuisine and doing things, they're taking a little bit of technique and history from other places and mixing it with what they know, with what their grandparents taught them, with what they grew up with. And now I think Mexican salsas are being recognized. Moles are being made in Europe. Pipianes are being made in the Netherlands. And so now I think we're reaching the point where we can start getting credit for those sauces because now they exist in so many different places whereas before it was just local, it was here.
Right. I like that perspective. So I know where I stand on this one, but I want to get your thoughts on this. I have this, for me, all tomato sauces come from what we call Mexico today, and were created by indigenous people. And that technique has proliferated, obviously. Is ketchup Mexican?
I have heard that. I have not been able to find any evidence to that.
Yeah, well, or could it be considered a derivative of a Mexican technique?
Like the only time that when Mexican use vinegar, it's generally like it's there are vinegar based salsas, obviously, like so hot sauce,
Yes.
but they're primarily chili based, so chili and vinegar, not a lot of tomato. A lot of times, if you want to put acid into a salsa, you don't add lime, you add a tomatillo, right? That becomes sort of like the bright tang in that.
Yeah.
I have not been able to find any salsas that come close to a ketchup.
Okay, you're on the fence on that one.
I mean, I've heard it. I don't know that I'm not saying it's not true, but I just can't, like, there's no equivalent. Like there's a
Yeah,
salsa.
no, I agree.
Yeah. But also, I'm like, we do so many really amazing things. I'm like, fine. You guys, whoever wants to say that they own ketchup, great, have it, because we got all the other amazing salsas here.
And it also makes me think a lot about this when I go to Ensenada and locals are putting ketchup on their tostadas, which I don't do. No, I don't do that. But okay, fair enough, no. Rick. I'm alone in my hypothesis that ketchup is Mexican.
Well, I'm curious. Like, what's the story?
Well, so the ketchup does have it. The actual name of the sauce comes from a Chinese sauce that was being used at the time. This was used to cover up the nasty meat that they were having in the city because they had no refrigeration.
Oh.
So people were finding all kinds of ways to cover up. They'd cook rotten meat. They'd cook it so that it wouldn't make them sick. And then they'd add a sauce. And this ketchup is like derived from a Chinese product that was called ketchup, or a similar spelling or pronunciation. But Heinz decided to use tomato sauce. And to me, all tomato sauces originate with the indigenous people, and that the fact that was brought to Europe and brought to, went around the world, but it started in the molcajetes of the Zapotecos and the Mexica and these different groups, that sauce technique is Mexican. So that's my only, making it sweet and putting it on hamburger, no, but.
That's interesting. I'm gonna have to look for that, because also, I mean, like, chamoy is derivative of Chinese salted plums, and I do love a really good homemade chamoy, like that actually has like those deep umami flavors and plum flavors in it as well. Not the stupid bottle sauces that are sort of neon pink.
No, the chamoy, that's all them. I mean, I'm also with that.
Yeah.
So I want to change up to talking about specifically the salsa that exists in Mazatlán, the ones that you're used to there, and a little bit about comida mazatleca, because it's very different. A lot of people don't understand that Sinaloa also has regions, that it's it's different in the north and Culiacan, but Mazatlán, being closer to Nayarit, has a lot of different things going on. So can you talk about the salsas in Mazatlán and a little bit about the food?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think probably one of my favorite Mazatlecan dishes is the aguachile. And I do think that Mazatlan has the best. And, like, to go even further, I've eaten shrimp all over the world, and I think the shrimp in Mazatlan is
it's amazing. Agreed.
The best. Like, it is so sweet, so abundant, so incredible. It's difficult to find bad shrimp here because it comes in every morning at 6 a.m. Like, it's always fresh. It's never frozen. A lot of it is sold here, unlike other coastal cities in Mexico where everything that's caught is flown into Mexico City and then redistributed.
Yeah.
Here, a lot of, I don't know, I don't want to say most because I don't know for certain, but if you are a local and even of modest means, don't have a lot of money, you can still afford shrimp.
Yeah.
And that is, to me, so beautiful, because in so many other places, things that are grown, things that are caught locally don't ever get eaten by the locals. And so the aguachiles here, the salsas that are used, so there's the traditional, the verde, the lime and tomatillo based. There's a morita base, so it's got like a really nice deep mahogany color, and it's like smoky with the flavor of the morritas. There's a negra, which has a little bit of soy sauce, and sometimes salsa inglesa, which is the Worcestershire sauce.
Yes.
And then there's also a tatemada, which I really, really like a lot. And so that's using lime and tomatillos and serranos, but they're charred, which I think just adds such a nice smoky element to the sweet shrimp. One of the favorite chiles in the northern states, and it's sort of 50-50 here, between the chile de árbol and then the chiltepín. I adore chiltepines.
Oh,
I think
wonderful.
That is actually one of my favorite. The last time I was in Hermosillo, which was earlier this year, I bought a kilo, which stupidly, that was probably a little much. It's a giant bag, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
But it's just, they're so good. And so a lot of salsas have as their heat base either chiltepín or chile de árbol. There's a taquera that she has a stand on the weekdays about a block and a half from my house. And she makes one of my favorite salsas, and I've heard it's the hottest one in the city. That's just rumor, but it is very hot, and I cry every time I eat it. But she uses habanero and chile de árbol, and it's the base is a salsa verde with big hunks of avocado in it. And so it's really tangy, but has a really nice cream to it. But then it's just crazy hot. But also, because of the habanero, you get a little bit of this sweet fruitiness.
Yeah.
So as you're crying and working your way through it, you just get that little hit of sweet fruit flavor, and it's so good.
No, the habanero, for people that take the time to survive the half-life of the heat, that it's one of the most flavorful chiles. All the chiles from that family, the manzano, they all have wonderful, interesting flavors if you can deal with the heat. But the thing you're talking about is such another interesting facet of salsas, is the layering of different fresh and dried chiles that create these complexities and heat.
Yeah, and I love layering the flavors like that. And so, I don't generally make salsas anymore with just one chile or even like one base. Like, my favorite salsas now, I generally will add a tomatillo to a salsa verde, or to a salsa roja, and maybe a plum or a tomato to a salsa verde, just to kind of change up the flavors. I like adding both dried and fresh chiles to a salsa, because you get sort of a nutty umami flavor from the chiltepín, the chile de árbol, but then you get this really nice kind of sharp grassiness from the serranos or the jalapenos. Also, the jalapenos here still have heat.
Yeah.
But then, as you said, like the habaneros are so incredibly flavorful and complex. And also, just a note about that to your listeners, you can tame the heat in these chiles. Like capsaicin, the heat compound,
right,
is soluble in acid, alcohol, and oil. So I have a dish, for example, like I have a maple glazed pork chop with, I think there's 10 or 12 habaneros in it. What you do is you basically just cut them open, and you soak them for a period of time. So about an hour will get you from like super spicy down to about like the heat level of a serrano.
Right.
An hour and a half will go into mild, and then after that it's like there's no heat at all. But so you can do that to any chile, like soak it in either alcohol or vinegar, and it'll also give you a nice little flavor of the alcohol or a little bit of tang from the vinegar as well, which I like, especially the vinegar. Like I've made salsa machas with habaneros that have been soaked in vinegar, and then you get like this little slight pickling flavor that I really, really like a lot.
Okay, so everybody has to pick up Salsa Daddy to get all these recipes and techniques and how to work with the chiles. What about the salsa roja that's used in enchiladas? Is it just guajillo, or are they doing something else there in Mazatlan?
It's a lot of the adobos and the salsa rojas cocidas are primarily guajillo. You will get an occasional chipotle or a morrita. Sometimes canned chipotles and adobo as well. But it's primarily that. And then, like I said, I have seen some versions with like Anaheim, or sometimes the chilgueros as well, just to kind of like offset the guajillo flavor and add a little bit more of the herby, grassy, vegetal flavors as well.
Wonderful. Well, I'm going to be looking for that next time I'm in Mazatlan. And speaking of Mazatlan, what's your favorite spot for tacos capeados there in Mazatlan?
There's a place, Capeado's Rudy, I believe it was. It's in like near the Golden Zone, which I live in El Centro, so it's a little bit far, so I don't really go there that often. That place I really like a lot, and they do a lot of. Basically, they'll like fry up anything. There used to be a place, but it closed here on the Malecon in El Centro. They had really, really great capeado de camarón and also camarón al coco, which I adore, with a pineapple habanero salsa. Oh, and you could sit like literally you were on the beach or like across the street from the beach, so you could watch the sunsets and have your camarón al coco. Oh, so good, but it's gone now. I'm assuming they're probably going to build a hotel or something.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, so for people who don't know the tacos capeados of Mazatlan, they don't just do fish and shrimp. They also do squid and other seafood and a variety. And they also have a lot of different toppings and salsas that you would not find in Ensenada. So I believe that Mazatlan is the second best fish taco capital after Ensenada. But for you living there, you might have a different. So what is your opinion, Ensenada versus Mazatlan?
No, so Ensenada for everything but shrimp. I think the almejas, the oysters, and the fish. I also, to be honest, like the tostadas, the mariscos in Ensenada. Oh my God!
Okay, let me rephrase it. I'm just talking about the fish tacos.
Oh, okay.
So I'll do it again. So what's your position on fish tacos in Ensenada versus fish tacos? Well, the fish taco, obviously, when we're talking fish tacos in Ensenada, we're talking fish and shrimp only. And when we're talking Mazatlan, we're talking fish, shrimp, and other seafood in a different kind of batter and different salsas. But which one is better, in your opinion?
Ensenada. I really
okay.
Yeah, I think there's I think it's also closer to the source. I think that from in Mexicali, when a lot of the Chinese immigrants introduced the tempura batter, I think that was sort of the basis for the capeado, and it's in Ensenada you get that crunch, right? Like you bite into fish and it's like you get those little lacy bits and you get the crunch. And to me, that's sort of the gold standard. And it's not, again, like I love the food here, but if someone said, where would you rather eat the taco capeado, it would be Ensenada.
Yeah, the batter is better. And again, that's why I say Ensenada's the best. Mazatlan is a very not so far second to me, more than Tecate and other places that people say are fish tacos. There's fish tacos all along the Pacific coast, but I think Mazatlan and Ensenada are the two that really stand out. So now I'm going to ask you, and this is really important for all of us, is what are your top spots to eat? I'm coming to Mazatlan and you're entertaining me. Where are we going to eat?
So for aguachile, which again is like my literal favorite dish here, there is a little place. It's just north of El Centro. It's called Ay Papa. It's just hands down, it's the best. I mean, it's the salsa, it's the quality of the shrimp, and I've been going there since the pandemic. Like that was sort of, it used to be my prize. I would write, I would set a goal for myself when I was writing Mi Cocina, like I'm going to write 10 recipes. And then after I finish the 10th recipe, I'm going to go have a big giant aguachile. And so
That's how you treat
Exactly.
yourself.
And so that's kind of how I got through most of that book. But the shrimp is so good, and the people that work there are amazing, and I love that place so much.
And when it comes to an aguachile, everybody listen to Rick, because it's all about the shrimp. If you don't have that shrimp, stop. Don't even make the dish.
Don't even make the dish. And also, like when you order it here,
go ahead.
Don't ask for it cooked. Like it's a shrimp cocktail. Like like the way that you need to experience shrimp, and probably in most places on the west coast of Mexico, the shrimp is really, really good. When I was the first time I experienced Pacific coastal shrimp was when I was I think I was 22 or 23. We had gone to Barra de Navidad. It was like me and a group of friends. And every morning the shrimp boats would come in. There was one person that was cleaning the shrimp. There was another person that was frying tortillas. There was another person that was making pico de gallo. And there was a last person that was climbing the trees to get fresh coconuts to make pina coladas. And so every morning for the week that I was there, we would eat a ceviche de camarón with freshly fried tostadas and literally a blender full of pina colada. It was like the best breakfast ever. And that was when I realized, that was the first time that I had that amazing shrimp. And it's kind of haunted me for the last 30 years. And it's partly why I'm here, because I just love the shrimp so much.
The shrimp, that is a good reason to be there. Give us 3 more spots that we have to hit in Mazatlán.
There's another place that I really love. It's called La Chilanga ES. It's a couple, a married couple, and they're from Mexico City. And I love a good huarache, tlacoyos. I love carne enchilada, cecina, like all the things that you can't necessarily get here or in the northern part of the country. Like it's there, and they're making it,
right,
the way that you would get it in Mexico City. So that's really amazing. And then Super Tacos a la Carreta. There's 2 locations, but the one that's closest to the centro is the one that I adore.
Are we talking chorreadas?
They do have them, but the 2 that I actually like the best is the cabeza and the tripitas. Oh my God. And they have really good salsas. They have about 6 different salsas, and they're all amazing. Their salsa verde cruda is really incredible. And the cabeza is just it's so unctuous and rich, and it just is falling apart. And then the tripitas are I order them really, really crispy. And so I've got my soft cabeza and my crispy tripitas, and I'm in heaven.
Okay, so we got an aguachile, we got some tacos, we got some comida chilanga. One more spot.
So this one is a little bit it's a panaderia. It's definitely not a traditional Mexican panaderia, but they have incredible bread. And I had to cut myself off of the pan de muerto, because I would literally eat 2 big pieces, and then I would, it's 10 o'clock in the morning and I'm falling asleep. I'm like, no, I can't do this anymore. But the panadero is 23 years old, and he is insanely talented. And so he makes a lot of laminated pastries, but there's for example, this pan de muerto, he uses his masa madre to make it. So it's got a little bit of a tang, and it's just with the orange, and it's just incredible. But all of their breads and all of their desserts there are insanely delicious. And that's here in El Centro. It's called Casa Hindi.
Okay, thank you so much, Rick. What else you got coming up? We know, so for our listeners, pick up his cookbooks, Mi Cocina and Salsa Daddy, and you can also experience his cuisine in the Bay Area. 6 locations?
So I'm local kitchens.
What else you got coming up?
And then I started a Substack. It's called Sazon, and I really, really love writing about Mexican culture and cuisine. And each week I'll make a different dish, but really go into the history of it. So this week, or actually today, I published a recipe for pipián de camote. Which actually uses roasted sweet potatoes in addition to pepitas, and I actually used walnuts. I wanted to have fun.
I saw that pop up on Instagram.
Yeah, and I've been having so much fun because I do a lot of research on the dish itself, and obviously, like, I've written a lot of pipián recipes, and I've eaten pipianes like all over the country, and so now, you know, I like to give sort of the backstory, give some regional variations, and then just kind of randomly make up something that I, you know, want to try. And like the sweet potato, I was really curious about how it would play in a dish. And with the chiles and a really good caldo de pollo and the pepitas and the walnuts, all fried in really good manteca, obviously. It's so earthy with like this really creamy sweetness from the camote. It's so, so good. And then if anybody is in Austin in the beginning of December, I believe December 5th, I'm going to be hosting a tamalada at Siete headquarters in Austin. So I'm going to be doing some demos for how to make tamales. We'll have like a tamale tasting, and then I'm going to have stations set up so you can spread the masa on corn husks and hojas de plátano, and then roll them, and then fill a pot. So it'll be hands-on. I'll be signing books. We'll be drinking, eating, you know, basically all the things that you do at a real tamalada.
Sounds like a great time. Okay. So, you know, Rick, thank you for coming on. It was great, you know, getting into the molcajete with you and talking about salsa.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been so great talking to you.
Thank you for tuning in to the Taqueando podcast this week. And be sure to tune in next week for another episode. And please leave us a rating or review wherever you listen to your podcasts.